Hey, what's up, comrades? We're here to talk about volume 43 of the fairy tale manga and all the exciting prep it does for the big battles with the demons and whatnot. But we actually pick up at the very beginning with the conclusion of the battle between Natsu and douchebag cat guy. So as we left off, Natsu is covered in explosions and he's loving life and he starts punching this guy and having more explosions, and Lucy and Wendy are like, holy shit, what's going on here? And then the cat guy gets super mad and he transforms into like a were-jaguar of some sort or whatever, and then Natsu like doesn't give a fuck about that, keeps fighting him. There's like more explosions and more back and forth and this and that and punches and more explosions and it's like, and then they're just like tearing this whole place apart. And then Natsu somehow combines his power with the power of Laxus, so he does like his fire lightning attack and just knocks this guy all the way fucking across the town, just decimating him, or what it seems. And then Natsu's like, hell yeah, and then he like falls down to the ground because he's completely exhausted and damaged. Lucy and Wendy go and they chitter chatter with him and he's like, I won. And then the cat guy like crawls back and is like, platform. He's like, I'm going to blow this whole place up along with me. I turned myself into a giant bomb. And when I fall, everyone will die and be destroyed with it. And then Lucy's like, you crazy dumb bitch, with her fucking awesome tits. And then Happy grabs the guy and flies up as high as he can go. And the guy's like, no, you can't do this. And everyone's like, Happy, no, Happy. And then there's like a big explosion and like Carla's like crying and everyone's like, what the fuck? And then Happy comes floating down all blown up and stuff, but he's got like crazy frizzled hair. And he's like, that was close. And everyone's like, haha, we did it. At that point, we kind of jump around a bit. Makarov's checking in with everybody about everybody else that was supposed to be saved. So, like, Gray and Juvia got to Elder Hog, but he's already dead. And there's, like, all this cutting apart of, like, the city and whatnot. And then Gajil and his girlfriend, Levy, along with her crew, they're, like, checking somebody else out, but he's gone, too, so he's likely dead. And then Kanna's getting, like, super concerned about it. And then lastly, we have Elfman and Lysiana we get like a nice shot of Lysiana's like tight ass, but the guy there is dead as well. But then he like seems to come alive and shatter the communications lacrima that Lysiana was about to call back for. And then we see the sexy demon lady with her massive tits sitting there being like bored looking and talking about the underworld and the demons and whatnot. And Elfman's like, let's do this. And all of a sudden he grabs Lysiana by the neck and he's like, the fuck? Because that's like her power, this hot demon lady. She like controls other people. Finally, we jump back to Lucy, who's reporting into Makarov about what's going on. And the elder they saved, he has like cat ears for some reason. I don't remember this being a thing before, but he's there. And so they're like getting information from him. And we find out that what these guys want, the bad guys want, is face. The fuck is face? Face is like it's like a particle. What do they call this thing? It's like one of the secret weapons the council has. They talk a little bit about Etherion and how it can blast cities and stuff and all, and then it's like, so what is face? Face is a magic pulse bomb, so when it goes off it'll destroy all magic on the entire continent, and it's super secret. No one really knows everything about it. It's sealed by three keys from former council members, so that's why these guys are like killing all. Tartarus is killing everybody because they're just trying to release the keys, and like nobody knows where it's at, and even the people who are the keys don't know they're necessarily the keys. So the only one who might know is the previous council master, and so they got to figure out that guy. And there's already a couple, and we see that the fairy tale has already kind of like figured out where that guy's at, and they've sent two of their best. They sent Mira Jane and Urza over there, and there's some like back and forth about a face and all that stuff with all the different main characters of fairy tale. Let me get a nice shot of Urza and Mira Jane like traveling. We pick up with them, and they find the council guy who like gives them tea, and they talk about face, and they talk about the council members and how he doesn't really know, and how this guy's like heard of Urza because of stuff she did in the past and all that stuff. And they kind of joke around, and they're having like a very nice conversation about what's going on and about all the sad stuff that's going on and everything. And that goes on for a bit, and then Mira Jane's like, they're here and we're surrounded. And so the Mira Jane and Urza stand up and they start fighting all these like Tartarus goons, like not any of the main demon characters, but we get some nice shots of them being like in sexy costumes and beating the shit out of them and whatnot and standing all epic and such. And then we head back over to Elfman, and he's like, no, Lysiana, don't make me do this. And then this demon lady's like, well, maybe if you sell me my soul. We then jump over to Dorn Balt, who's thinking, he's like standing in a cell, and he's thinking about, what's this guy's name? Cobra. And the release of what would this go? Reese and Sace, I think. And then we see they're all released. And so we see Cobra, and then we see, I can't remember what those guys' names are, like Richard, I can't remember what, he's like Goldface or whatever, and then Zero, but no, Zero's his like other form. It's like the other one, and then Nightmare or Midnight, whatever. And Sayer, I think, is the fast guy, and then like Hot Chick. Yeah, and so then they're all standing around talking and whatnot, and then Cobra's like, hey, you, Zero, go fuck yourself. And he like tears him like a big hole in him, and he collapses. And then he's like, I don't want to hear any complaints of Midnight. And Midnight is like, yeah, whatever. He was no father to us. He was just like, he's like, if you heard him doing something, that must have been true. And everyone's like, okay, cool. It's great to be free and all this stuff. And then they look up, and Jalil and Marudi are standing there. And like, huh. And then Dornbalt thinks about Jalil and Orisi and Sace. And then we jump back to Jalil, and he's like, Marudi, get out of here. Let me hang with these guys. Going over to Natsu and crew, we see that Natsu has like figured out that the council leader is actually an asshole, and so he takes off. And then we jump back over to Mary Jane and Urza are just beating the shit out of the goons, and they're like, that seems way too easy for like this council member. And they're like, wait a second, that's odd. Row. And then Natsu reveals that like someone from the council is the only reason the Tartarus to know about Face and where to get it and stuff would be if someone had betrayed the council, had betrayed all of like Very Kind, and that must be the leader, who's this guy. And then we see Mary Jane and Urza both pass out from like the tea they drank earlier, and that's because that's right. This council leader guy betrayed everybody, and he's working for Tartarus as well. And so he picks up Mary Jane and Urza, and then we jump a bit in the future when Natsu finally gets over to the council leader's house, and he can't find anybody there, and he figures out that they were drugged and all this stuff, and then he starts sniffing, and he's like, I can track him by smell. And so he destroys the guy's house, and then they head off once again. Over at Tartarus, we get an excellent shot of naked Urza, who is being tortured by whatever the fuck this lady's name is. The bird lady. And then so bird lady and Urza are going back and forth about how Mary Jane's like in a transformation chamber and how her flesh is going to be changed, just like was promised with Minerva. And then she wants to know where Jalil is and all this stuff. And it's like, why am I naked? Blah, blah, blah. And they go back and forth with that. And she wants the location of Jalil. And Urza's like, I obviously don't know. Then we jump back over to Jalil and Orisi and Sace. And they're talking about how they want to be free. And Dornbelt set this thing up. And Rudy's like, I'm not going to leave, you crazy. And Jalil's like, I got to do this. Let me take care of this. And it's like, you just want to send us back to prison. And then they all talk about how they're going to fight Jalil, except for Richard, who's like, no, I refrained from battle. I follow the path of love. And then they're like, fuck you. And then Midnight's like, no. We all have our freedom now. If that's what Richard wants to do, that's fine. And so then they start fighting, and we get some badass like fight between, well, Jalil is just like giving it to all these guys. He's like reflecting their stuff and fighting them and whatnot. And they keep talking about being free and whatnot. We then go back over to Urza, who's continued to be tortured about what she knows and doesn't know. And this demon lady has the power to like make senses like much more intense or whatever, or less, right? That's like her demon magic or whatever. And so there's a lot of beating up there. We jump back to Jalil. He's starting to struggle. Back to Urza, more torture, more talking about how they need to get to him because I guess Jalil is one of the keys. So when he dies, then it will help them access Face, right? And then the bird lady starts talking about she'll trade Mary Jane's freedom for like Jalil's location. Otherwise, Mary Jane's going to die. And then, there's some more back and forth to that. We then see the leader of Tartarus, or like the goofy guy and like the round guy in the armor, talking to the chairman about what's going on, about how the chairman's going to make all this money and how he gets to be put in charge again and kind of all this stuff, and about finding Jalil. And then all of a sudden they see something out in a window and they're like, the fuck is that? And it's Natsu. And Natsu comes in and he just punches the shit out of the chairman. And then everyone in the guild, we see like Deep Freeze and like Skull Mask and whoever else and Bird Lady all like looking like the fuck is happening. And then Natsu's like, where are Urza and Mary Jane? And then Yaktriga is her name, the bird lady. She gets like summoned. Oh, no. She summons a creature called Yaktria, who is like this tentacle monster. And then the bird lady's like, do not touch her, just watch her. And so then Natsu starts arguing with a rotund armor guy, and then they start fighting and they go back and forth. We then hop over to Gray and Juvia, who are riding like a giant panther. Like the fuck? And Juvia's like very concerned, but Gray's like, oh, don't worry, we'll be fine. We're Fairy Tail can really lose. And then they like hold hands, right? So clearly there's some stuff going on there. And Juvia is like comforted by him. Back over with Natsu, he's fighting this guy, and the guy starts talking about souls. The price of souls is like 1,000 souls. And then then Natsu like beats him up some more, and now the price of souls is like 2,000 souls, but Natsu doesn't seem to be doing too much damage to him because the guy keeps getting up. At some point, Deep Zero or whatever, he comes walking up. He's like, let me take care of this. And then the armor guy like grabs the chairman and kind of wanders off. And then Natsu's like, hey, it's getting cold. And then they talk about Silver is like, hey, apologize. Thanks for taking care of the giants for me. I didn't mean to like freeze them and leave them like that. That's my bad. And Natsu's like, okay. Wait, you remind me of somebody. You smell just like gray. And then Natsu gets instantly deep frozen. And the guy's like, stop speaking that, never speak that tainted name to me. And then Happy's like very concerned. A bit later, Natsu gets tossed completely naked and chained up into a prison cell. And in that prison cell, we see Lysiana, who's also chained up naked, and so they get like very concerned, and they talk about that, what happened with Elfman and everything else, and about Urza and Mira Jane and everything, and they talk about how they got to get out of there, and Natsu like refuses to give up, and so they start working on that. We then go to like Bird Lady's room, and there's like a sexy demon is there too, and they're talking about that the wards and how they've already killed 2 of the people that like had the keys for the wards, but there's like one more and it's Jalil, so they got to figure that out. And they talk about torturing Urza and using their various abilities and whatnot. And then they talk about what to do with the rest of Fairy Tail, because Fairy Tail is just causing problems, all sorts of problems they don't want to deal with. And then Sexy Demon Lady is like, don't worry, I'll take care of that. We then hop back over to Jalil, and he's starting to get beat up a little bit by Racy and Sace. Like they're starting to really like team him and bind him and all this stuff. And everyone's watching. And then Jalil says something about he's going to free everybody, and then he just like beats the shit out he like knocks everybody over. But then we see that Zero's starting to get up. Back over at Fairy Tail, Lucy and Wendy and Levy and Juvia and Gray and everybody are there, and Gajil, and they're talking about tracking Tartarus, where it could possibly be and whatnot, and they don't know where it could be, and maybe they could smell it, but if Wendy couldn't use her sense of smell, like it's going to be way too late for Gajil to do that. And then all of a sudden Happy comes flying in, like, holy shit, what are you doing here? And he's like, not to play. He's like, blah, 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 blah. And then Carla like slaps him and is like, calm down. And so he talks about Silver and looks over at Gray and then says like, he knows where the base is, but it's like a floating cube in the sky, and then it's moving around. And so Levy's like, I'm super smart. I can calculate where it's going to be if you tell me everything you know. And then he does, and then Levy gets to it. Meanwhile, and then Happy's like crying, and then he gets to get his face put in Lucy's cleavage, which the dream, the fucking dream. At that point, Elfman comes like rolling in, and he's clearly possessed and looks kind of crazy. And then we see like a shot of hot demon lady, and she's very pleased with herself. So he talks about Haliciana, and he lost her, and then he came back, and then she got captured, all this stuff. And then Levy's like doing all these crazy calculations, and then kind of like really starts flipping Elfman some shit and giving him a hard time because she definitely suspects something. And we get like a flashback to the deal. So Elfman got like possessed, and it's approximately 5 times. Oh, and that she gave him some sort of like lacrima that's like, or something that's highly concentrated ether that's like 500 times stronger than the Jupiter cannon. And that it will blow up Fairy Tail and kill everybody. And Elfman's like, I won't do it. But then she like uses she calls it her macro to get him to do that and sends him out there. And he's like, I'm going to go blow up my own guild, whatever. And then we hop back over to naked Lysiana, and there's a lot of nakedness in this. It's fucking fantastic fun. And Natsu, and they're talking about getting shackles off and working on that and doing all that stuff. And then Zero shows up, and he tosses a cape in there, so Lysiana doesn't have to be naked anymore. And she's like, thank you. And he's like, why don't you just let us go? Stop being an asshole. And he's like, smells like gray. And then Silver at some point is like, Natsu, no, it couldn't be. Whatever that means. We then head back over to the chairman and the round rotund guy, and the chairman's using his like super archive magic, which lets him track like anything or do whatever. In this way, he can keep track like every wizard on the continent. So he's using that to track down Jalil. And he's like going to find him, and then we see Urza being tortured. And then we see Jalil, he's all beat up, and he's like standing against these guys, and Marudi's like, let me help, and he's like, no, stand back. And then all of a sudden Zero comes and like blasts him, and everyone's like freaking the fuck out. And then we jump back over to the chairman, and he's searching, and then all of a sudden we see like Jalil with like a hole in him, and Marudi's running up, and he's like, stay away, run. And then she's like, no, it isn't over yet. And he's like, yeah, we are. And then Zero jumps at Jalil and like punches him, and so that he like disappear. And then we see Armored Guy, and he's like, "Did you find Jalil?" And the chairman's like, "Better than that." And then we jump back over and we see Maruti standing outside a crater with Zero in the middle, and Jalil is like completely disappeared. And she's like, "No, Jalil." And then all the members of Racing Sace are like very concerned, except Midnight, obviously. And then Jalil, we see him like shatter glass, and the Midnight's like, "The fuck?" And everyone's like, "Jalil, how?" And then we look over, and it's like, no. Cobra really straight up killed like the leader guy. And he's like, "Oh, how'd you see through my nightmare?" And Jalil has like his eyes closed. He's like, "How the fuck did closing your eyes make that possible?" And then Jalil does something where he like locks them all into place, or like whatever, and they're like, "What the fuck's happening here?" And Jalil is like 7-star Grand Chariot blast, and he blasts the shit out of these dudes for this like heavenly body of magic, and we get this awesome scene of like all these explosions and stuff. And Rudy and Richard, who weren't fighting, are like kind of, they're almost blown back. And then Jalil like walks up, and Richard is like, "Holy shit!" And then Midnight's like, "I've lost, kill me." And Jalil's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And they're like, "Oh, so you're going to take us back to jail?" And he's like, "No, I want you to join the guild. What is there? Karime Sorese." And he's like, "I'm going to make sure all your prayers are fulfilled, but there's something you must do for me first." And Midnight's like, "What's that?" And he's like, "We have to fight someone together. We have to defeat Zareth." We then bounce back over to the chairman, and he's super excited because he took the key of control that Jalil had inside him and transferred it to himself with his archive powers. And he's super excited about it. And he's talking about finding some random nobody, putting it in there, and then they can kill him. And that'll open up the thing. And he's like laughing about it and talking about it really. And then Round Guy is like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then what's her fuck? The bird lady comes up and just like stabs Chairman, killing him, because that's like unlocked. That's the key. That's all they need to do. Like, fuck you, you dumb idiot. And then the whole cube starts shaking, and Natsu and Urza and Luciano are like, "The fuck, what's going on here?" And then they're like, "Yay, we did it!" And the cube's reacting and all this stuff. And then Natsu gets concerned because Luciano's like really having a hard time, and she's thinking about Mira Jane and Elfman. And then we see like the orbs start to like explode, and then we see Elfman crying, and he's like, "Luciano, I love you." And that wraps up volume 43 of Fairy Tale. So pretty good, but not as excellent, because a lot of it's like build up and moving around and kind of setting up the bad guys for being real asshole bad guys. So I think it picks up in 44. Yeah, it picks up like pretty quick. But go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.